We're going to be looking at, three main characters here. We're going to look at Canaan, the land of Canaan. We're going to be looking at Joshua, who is the person that this book is titled after. And we're going to look at the Israelites. So let's go into it. The first one is Canaan. So the land of Canaan is the promised land. We know the story of the promised land from the story of Abraham. God called Abraham in the book of Genesis and told Abraham to leave his father's land, to leave his father's house, to leave his relatives, all of them behind, and go to a land that he will show him. God did not tell Abraham what the land would be. He just told Abraham that he had promised him a land, and he was going to make Abraham and Abraham's descendants his people, and he's going to give them an inheritance. So Abraham obeyed God. Abraham left his father's land, and Abraham was on a journey. And Abraham began what we know in the Bible as the sojourners. And the Israelites, the Christians, the Jews, they always saw themselves as sojourners because God was leading them to the promised land. And that began the story of Abraham. Abraham left. He left Lot. He settled in a particular hill country. Lot separated from him. He was left alone. God blessed him, gave him a child, Isaac. And Isaac, they continued to, move away from there. They left the place. When there was time, and you see the story, when a time of famine comes, Isaac will leave where he's currently living. He will migrate to somewhere else. That was like how they lived. They've always lived in different places, not having a permanent home. And Isaac also gave birth to Jacob, right? Jacob at some point also left home, right? Jacob left his father's house. He went to live with his uncle Laban. There he met his wives, Rachel and Leah. And then his uncle Laban did not treat him very well. So after a few years, a long time, Jacob left the house of Laban, and Jacob began his own journey. Now, God is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The same way, God is your God, and God will be the God of your children, and your children's children after you. That's how amazing God is. That's on this side. So, in all these periods, when they kept living, God was their God, because God gave them a promise. And that promise is the promise of Abraham. And Abraham passed down that promise to every generation after him. So every generation of Israelites, from Jacob, who is now known as Israel, they carried with them the knowledge of the promise that God will give us a promised land. God is taking us somewhere. They had that promise in their family for generations, and every person in the family passed down the promise. Everybody passed down the promise to them. We are going somewhere. We are going to a promised land. God has promised us something, right? That was how they passed it down. And we follow that story. Jacob becomes Israel. He lands in a particular land. He gets old. He stays there. And another thing that's coming to my mind is how we see it is that God takes a man, the person walks with God, then gets somewhere, gets old, dies there. Then their children from that particular place become, God visits their children and works with them as well. So we see Israel somewhere is old, is in a particular place now. And that we know the 12 tribes of Israel. Of those 12 tribes of Israel, the person that migrates is actually Joseph. And Joseph leaves them. He didn't want to, but he leaves them, and he went into the land of Egypt. And in the land of Egypt, he prospered. So he invited his brothers to come and join him. And after a while, they became slaves. The promised generation became slaves in the land of Egypt. Now, one thing we always recognize in the Bible is that whenever the Bible mentions the land of Egypt, they always mention it they always say it as they went down to Egypt. So it is always described as the land that you go down into. And everything in the Bible is useful. Every full stop, every word is useful. So when you're studying the Bible, always pay attention to those kind of expressions. Why did they always describe Egypt as down? And they will say, let's go up from Egypt. It's because Egypt is not the promised land. Egypt was like a detour, right? On the road, on the journey that God had for these Israelites. Anyway, so they were there in the land of Egypt. They grew old there, they multiplied, and they became slaves. And then they cried out to God and said, you've promised us to take us to a promised land. where is this promised land? And then God raises up Moses, and Moses delivers these people. God uses Moses to deliver these people out of Egypt. And then, so this is where the story gets interesting. I'm getting to Canaan now. And they left Egypt. They got to the Red Sea, which is, the Red Sea was the demarcation for them from Egypt into the promised land. And then they crossed the Red Sea, and then they are in a place that the Bible describes as the wilderness. Now, again, these people don't yet know the promised land. They don't know whether it's Algeria or it's Tunisia. They just know that they are going somewhere. Now, to do this, it takes faith. That is why the Bible in the Hebrews 11, the Bible describes Abraham as the father of faith. It takes faith to not know where you're going, but to just be going. Like God says, pack up your bags and leave your house and just be walking on the road to a place I will show you. Come on. You know, it takes faith. It is not realistic. It doesn't make natural sense, but it takes faith. So we see these people, they've been working on a promise by faith for many years, many generations. People have died not entering into the promised land, but they keep believing there is a land we are going. There is a land we are going, right? And now they're in the wilderness. And one day, God raises Moses and says, Moses, climb up to this mountain and look ahead. And that day, God showed Moses the promised land. For the first time, Moses sees the land of promise. Now, Moses tells them, you guys, we are going to, this is the promised land that God wants us to go. He picks 10 people and he sends them to spy out the land. Now, he tells them to spy out the land and they come back. They come back with great things from this land. They come and say this land is flourishing with milk and honey. They bring some fruits from this land and it is amazing. Great fruits, big, humongous fruits, better than whatever they've experienced or they are currently experiencing in the wilderness. But this is where we see the comma. But even though they see the promised land is amazing, is nice, is great, they have doubts. The first time in their wonderful journey, they doubt God as a people, right? And God was cross with them, and we will get, let me see. Okay, I think we'll get into that. Let me put a pin in the story right there. Now, let's talk about Canaan, because I want to explain the significance of Canaan. Canaan is the promised land. And I know you know that, so this is not revelation. But let me now give you revelation about the land of Canaan. The land of Canaan is a land that God himself waters. Let me explain. In Egypt, rain doesn't fall in Egypt. So in Egypt, for them to get crops out of the land of Egypt, for the land to produce anything for them, they had to do a lot of manual labor. So they had to go and carry water from the Nile and take that water and use it to water their land. Egypt was like a desert land. Rain was not falling in Egypt. Egypt was not a land that God himself blessed. Canaan is described as a land that God himself blessed. That was the promise. God said, I'm taking you to a land in which I am the one sustaining you in that land. Let me break it down. In Egypt, the children of Israel had to sustain themselves. Let me explain it. They had to be the one to wake up in the morning, go to the Nile, carry water their plants, plant their plants, take it out. The only time that water flowed freely in Egypt was whenever the Nile overflowed its bank and flowed back into Egypt. That's the only time. So the Egypt represents for us as a land where you are surviving by your own effort. You are toiling to eat. You are toiling to eat. It's a land of struggle, basically. It's a land of hard work. It's a land of human sustenance. You prosper by your own handwork. It's like the rat race. If you don't work, you are not eating. It's as simple as that. If you don't go to work, you don't get paid. If you don't get paid, you don't have food. So you have to work. You have to keep working to be able to eat. That's the easiest way I can explain the land of Egypt. Whereas the land of Canaan was a land that God himself was watering by what we know as rain now. The land of Canaan was a land that rain fell regularly. God himself was watering the land. They still had to sow and plant and do all that, but the manual labor of watering their own land. Now, let me again go back and explain to you the significance of watering a land. You can dig sand and put your seed into it, but without water on the land, nothing's going to germinate. Water is as important as the seed, as important as the land. That's why there's some places on earth where things don't grow. That's why you can't go into the desert. And if you matter, take the best seed of tomato and plant it in Sahara Desert, nothing will come out because it is not a land that is being watered. So the rain is falling on your land is a blessing. So the land of Canaan signifies a place of fertility, a place that God himself is one taking care of you. And that was why it is a promised land. God is telling you that I'm taking you out of Egypt. I'm taking you out of the place where you survived by your own handwork. You survived by how hard you worked. But I'm taking you to a place, a land that I've prepared it for you. You don't have to go there and worry about watering your seed. Just sow your seed. I will do the watering myself. So that's the significance of Canaan. I want you to keep that in mind. That Canaan is the land that God has promised. God is literally giving them rest from their hard labor. He's saying, I'm taking you to a promised land. I'm taking you to a table. The Bible says in the book of Psalm 23, he said, the Lord set a table before me. The Lord is the one that set the table, not you. God tells you, he invites you to sit down at the table, but he has already set it. That was how the land of Canaan is. God is saying, I'm taking you out of your hard labor. I'm taking you to a land whose builder, whose waterer is God. That's the significance of Canaan. Now, for us in 2022, Canaan represents for you a promised land. Now, let's go back to Joshua. What's the significance of Joshua? Now, Joshua, after the Israelites doubted God in the wilderness, God was cross with them. And God wanted to destroy all of them and make a new generation from Moses. But Moses begged God, and God decided to, forgive them. But what God said was, he was going to kill, all this, the generation of people that doubted him will have to die out. And it will be a new generation of people that has never been in Egypt, that don't have the love of Egypt. So I'm not spending a lot of time on the significance because I want you to really get it. The reason why the children of Israel doubted God was, in Egypt, they were eating well, things were growing from the earth. They were eating well, they were okay, plants were growing, food was growing, they felt like they were okay. That was why in the wilderness, when they doubted God, they said they missed the cucumber. Literally, we miss the cucumber, we miss the carrot, we miss the food of the land of Egypt. Even though they were suffering in the land of Egypt, they were slaves, they were being beaten, they were being told not to give birth to certain kind of children, and children were being killed. But they missed the food in the land of Egypt. And it comes to us today, it's sometimes you want to manage, and God is telling you that I want to take you to a promised land, a land that I am the one that will water it. These people, God was cross with them, and God said, I will kill this generation of Israelites that love Egypt more than they love the promise. They love what they have experienced more than what I'm promising them. So they were in the wilderness for years, and these people died out. This generation of doubting Israelites died out. But only 2 people in that generation did not die. We have Joshua and Caleb. Now let's go to Joshua. Joshua is the grandson of Joseph, actually. Joshua's father was called Nun, and Nun's father is Ephraim, and Ephraim's father is Joseph. So Joseph is Joshua's great grandfather. So you need to understand that, the significance of that. Now Joshua as well, Joshua and Caleb were the oldest people in the camp because their generation had died out. Their friends had died out. The people that they grew up with had died out. They were the oldest ones in the camp. And they were told to lead these younger Israelites who did not experience going to the Red Sea. They did not experience Egypt. They did not experience the fire on the mountain when God gave Moses the 12 commandments. They did not experience all that. This was a new, brand, fresh crop of Israelites. And God now called Joshua out of them and said, lead these people. So thinking about Joshua, it must have been difficult for him. It's easy to lead people that understand where you're coming from. But these people were fresh, new. they didn't understand a lot of things about God. They didn't understand a lot of, like, that was the people that Joshua had to lead. So in a way, it kind of makes sense that God will tell Joshua to be strong. I think now it makes sense that God will tell Joshua to meditate on the word day and night, because these people that were around here, right, the people that he was leading, they may not have had that frame of reference. They don't have the history, right, of God. And it's very possible that their parents passed it down to them before they died, but they don't have that first-hand experience. This will also be their first time experiencing God. This will be their first time experiencing, something miraculous like passing the Red Sea. Of course, they were experiencing the blessing of manna that was different than from heaven, but this was the first time experiencing all that. So